Lucas adjusted his cufflinks, his fingers brushing the cool metal with a nervous precision that betrayed the calm of his tailored suit. At 38, he had mastered the art of composure, the firm handshake, the measured smile, the effortless command of boardrooms. But here, standing before glass cases filled with necklaces that shimmered like captured starlight, he felt oddly unmoored. "Something for a special occasion, sir?" asked the shop assistant, her voice smooth as satin. He nodded, though his throat tightened. "Yes, pendant. For someone important. Someone important." The words sounded hollow even to him. Sophia deserved more than vague pronouns and last-minute gestures. Their 2 years together had been pleasant, comfortable even, but lately he'd begun to wonder if pleasant was enough. Still, he'd promised her a gift for their anniversary, and Lucas wasn't a man who broke promises. His eyes drifted over sapphires, diamonds, emeralds, each piece dazzling, yet strangely impersonal. Then, in the far corner of the display, something caught his attention. A delicate silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, its curve cradling a single pearl that glowed with soft, quiet light. "That one," he said, pointing before he could second-guess himself. The assistant lifted it with gloved hands, placing it gently on a velvet pad. "It's inspired by old Portuguese poetry," she said, smiling. "The moon as a keeper of secrets, the pearl as a tear turned to wisdom." Lucas didn't answer. He was remembering something. Years ago, on a beach in Algarve, Marina had pointed to the same moon shape in the sky and whispered, "That's the moon that watches over second chances." Back then, they'd believed they'd never need one. He swallowed hard. "I'll take it." As the assistant wrapped the box in deep blue paper tied with silver thread, Lucas stared out the window. The city stretched before him, his empire of deals, penthouses, and polished surfaces. Yet, for the first time in years, he felt a quiet ache beneath his ribs, like a door long closed had just creaked open. He paid without looking at the total. What was money, after all, if not a shield against feeling? He tucked the box into his coat pocket, its weight both trivial and immense. Stepping back onto the sidewalk, autumn air kissed his cheeks. Crisp, clean, alive. He took a deep breath, ready to return to his world of control and certainty. And that's when he saw her, standing just a few feet away, outside the little bookstore with its ivy-covered awning, was Marina. She was holding a paper bag with books spilling slightly over the top. What to expect when you're expecting, peeked out from beneath a novel by Clarice Lispector. But it wasn't the books that stopped his heart. It was her belly, rounded, glowing beneath the soft fabric of her mustard sweater, unmistakably pregnant. 7 months, maybe 8. Her hair was shorter now, her posture more grounded, but her eyes, those deep, knowing eyes, were exactly as he remembered them. And they were fixed on him. Time didn't just slow this time. It shattered. She didn't speak. Neither did he. The city noise faded into a distant hum, as if the world had drawn breath and held it. Then, softly, she said, "Lucas," just his name. No anger, no accusation, only quiet recognition and something else he couldn't place. Sadness? Resignation? Or was it hope? He opened his mouth, but no words came. His hand instinctively went to his pocket, where the pendant box pressed against his thigh like a secret he suddenly wished he'd never bought. Because in that moment, staring at the woman who once knew his soul better than he knew it himself, now carrying a life he hadn't known existed, he realized something with devastating clarity. No amount of wealth could buy back time. No jewel could outshine the quiet miracle standing before him. And no carefully curated life could shield him from the truth he'd been running from. He still loved her. Not in the loud, dramatic way of movies, but in the deep, silent way of roots beneath soil, of tides drawn to the moon, of a heart that never truly let go. He took a step forward, hands trembling at his sides. "Marina," he whispered, his voice cracking like dry earth finally touched by rain. "I didn't know." And for the first time in years, Lucas wasn't the millionaire. He wasn't the strategist. He was just a man, raw, exposed, and utterly human. standing in the autumn light face to face with a second chance he never saw coming. Certo, agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada topico que for desenvolve. Mi conti sobrio topico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita emoco. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amingles. Com 6.000 characters when 3, max 11:47 a.m. Lucas stood frozen before the glass case, the pendant he'd just chosen resting in its velvet nest like a slumbering secret. The shop was silent now. Only the soft ticking of an antique clock and the distant rustle of silk curtains stirred the air. But inside him, a storm raged. He'd thought this would be simple. Walk in, pick something elegant, impress Sophia, return to the life he'd so carefully rebuilt. Yet now, as his eyes flickered between the delicate crescent moon pendant and a simpler gold disc with a single, engraved olive branch, her favorite symbol, back when they used to walk through Lisbon's botanical gardens on Sunday mornings, he felt the ground shift beneath his polished shoes. "Would you like to see it on a chain, sir?" the assistant asked gently, holding out the moon pendant on a slender silver strand. He nodded, but his mind wasn't on chains or clasps. It was on Marina's hands, how they used to trace constellations on his chest during sleepless nights, how she once said the moon wasn't just a rock in the sky, but a witness to everything we bury and everything we hope for. "This one is timeless," the assistant added, her voice warm. "Many choose it for its quiet elegance. It doesn't shout, it whispers. Whispers, just like Marina." Sophia, on the other hand, loved boldness. Diamonds that caught every eye, necklaces that announced presence before she entered a room. She'd laugh when he called her dazzling, tossing her hair with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. But Marina, she'd worn a thin silver chain with a tiny seashell for 5 years. "It's from our first trip," she'd say when he'd kiss her neck, his lips brushing the cool metal. "I never take it off." He hadn't seen that shell in years. Had she kept it, thrown it away, buried it with the rest of what they lost? His fingers hovered over the two pendants. The moon, mysterious, introspective, full of unspoken longing. The disc bright, direct, confident. One spoke to the past he couldn't forget. The other to the future he was trying to build. I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The assistant smiled kindly. "Sometimes the hardest choices aren't between what's beautiful and what's plain, but between what feels true and what you think you should want." Her words struck like a bell. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, saw Marina's face the day he told her he was leaving. How she didn't cry, just nodded slowly, as if she'd seen it coming long before he had. Saw Sophia's excited text that morning. "Can't wait to see what you pick. Make it something unforgettable. My love gemstone." Unforgettable. He opened his eyes, took a slow breath. "The moon," he said firmly, though his chest ached. "I'll take the moon." Not because it was flashy, not because it would make Sophia gasp in delight, though it might, but because, deep down, he was still the man who once lay on a rooftop with Marina, pointing out Ursa Major and promising her a life written in stars. He was choosing the whisper over the shout. As the assistant carefully placed the pendant into a box lined with midnight blue satin, Lucas felt a strange mix of relief and regret. He was doing the right thing, for Sophia, for his present, for the image of happiness he'd constructed like a fine watch, precise and gleaming. But as he zipped the box into his coat pocket, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't buying a gift. He was burying something, and somewhere, deep in his bones, he already knew. The past doesn't stay buried. Not when it's breathing, waiting, standing just outside a bookstore with a life growing inside her. A life he never saw coming, yet somehow feels like the only holding its breath. He tucked his hands into his coat, fingers brushing the smooth corner of the gift box, and began walking toward his parked car down the avenue. But his mind wasn't on the engine's purr or the leather seat waiting for him. It was still tangled in silver moons and olive branches, in Marina's quiet voice years ago saying, You don't have to buy me anything. Just be here. He laughed then, confident, careless, and kissed her forehead. I'll always be here. A lie he hadn't known he was telling. He quickened his pace, as if walking faster could outrun the memories. The sidewalk was crowded, tourists with maps, couples sharing coffee, a street musician playing a mournful violin. But Lucas moved through it like a ghost, unseen, untethered. His phone vibrated. A message from Sophia? Did you get it? Sparkling heart, I'm already imagining how I'll look wearing it tonight. He didn't reply. Not yet. He turned the corner, the bookstore now in view. Its warm amber lights spilling onto the pavement like liquid gold. And there, standing just beneath the awning, was Marina. Again, not by chance, not by accident. She was still holding the paper bag of books, but now she stood squarely in his path, her expression unreadable. Her coat was open just enough to reveal the gentle swell of her belly beneath a soft cream blouse. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't frowning. She was simply waiting. Lucas's breath caught. His pulse hammered in his temples. Marina, he said, voice rough, as if he hadn't spoken in days. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. She took a small step forward. I didn't plan to come back, she admitted. Her voice calm but threaded with something deeper. Resignation? Resolve? But I left my scarf inside. And when I came out, she paused, her eyes flicking to his coat pocket. Just for a second, but long enough for him to feel exposed. I saw you walking away, and I realized I couldn't let you go without saying something. He swallowed. What is it? She shifted the bag to her other arm, one hand resting lightly on her belly. Her name is Laura. The name landed like a stone in still water, rippling through everything. Laura? He echoed, stunned. Yes. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. After your grandmother, the one who used to send me those little lavender sachets every Christmas. You remember? He did, vividly, his avu Laura warm hands strong. Will, the woman who told him, the day he brought Marina home. This one has your soul in her eyes, meu neto. Don't let her go. He'd let her go. Now, standing before the woman who carried his grandmother's name in her daughter's heartbeat, he felt the full weight of his mistakes, not as regrets, but as living, breathing consequences. I didn't know you remembered her, he whispered. I remember everything, Marina said softly, the good and the broken. A silence settled between them, thick with unspoken years. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed. Car honked. Life moved on. But here, beneath the amber glow of the bookstore light, time seemed suspended. Lucas's hand drifted to his pocket again, instinctive, defensive. I was just buying something for Sophia, he said, the words tasting like ash. Marina's gaze didn't waver. I know. You know? I saw you in the jeweler's window, she admitted quietly. I didn't mean to spy. I was just waiting for the rain to pass. She glanced up at the clear sky, then back at him, a ghost of irony in her eyes. It never came. He didn't know what to say. Apologize? Explain? Beg for forgiveness he didn't deserve? Instead, he asked the only question that mattered. Does he know? The father. She looked down at her belly, her fingers tracing a slow circle. He knows. He chose not to be part of this. A beat. But that's okay. I'm not alone. She lifted her eyes to his, steady, clear. I haven't been since I found out I was carrying her. Something cracked open inside him, wide, deep, irreversible. Before he could speak, Marina added, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't come here to change your life, Lucas. I came because, when I saw you, I realized I didn't want Laura's story to start with secrets. Even if you're not in it, I wanted you to know her name. To know she's real. He stared at her, his vision blurring. The pendant in his pocket suddenly felt like a betrayal. Not to Sophia, but to this moment, to this fragile, sacred truth standing before him in a cream blouse and worn boots. I'm sorry, he said. And this time it wasn't performative. It was raw. It was everything. Marina nodded slowly. I know. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Back toward the bookstore, toward her life, toward the daughter who already carried a name that when 3 max 11:57 a.m., the moment Marina disappeared around the corner. Lucas didn't move. His body stood still, but his mind raced like a storm overtaking a quiet sea. The name Laura echoed in his chest, not just as a word, but as a presence. An invisible thread now stitching his past to a future he hadn't imagined. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the jeweler's box, holding it like evidence of a life that suddenly felt borrowed. He looked down at it. The deep blue paper, the silver ribbon, everything about it screamed performance. A gift meant to dazzle, not to mean, and Sophia would love it. She'd wear it to their dinner tonight, hold it up in candlelight, and smile that radiant smile that always made him feel like he'd done something right. But for the first time, he wondered, was it right? Or just convenient? A cold wind swept down the avenue, rustling fallen leaves and tugging at his coat. He shoved the box back into his pocket and started walking. Not toward his car, but in the direction Marina had gone. He didn't know why. He wasn't chasing her. He just needed to breathe somewhere that didn't feel like a stage. He found himself in a small park a block away, benches scattered beneath bare-limbed trees, the kind of place people passed through but rarely paused in. He sat. The leather of his shoes creaked. His hands trembled slightly as he unbuttoned his coat. And then his phone rang. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. He hesitated. 1 ring. 2. On the 3rd, he answered. "Hey!" he said, voice quieter than he intended. "Lucas." Her voice was bright, bubbling with anticipation. "Did you get it? Tell me you got the emerald one we saw online." He closed his eyes. "No, I went with something else." "Oh? What is it? Is it a surprise?" "It's a moon pendant, silver, with a pearl." A pause. Then softer. "That's actually really beautiful. Romantic, even." She laughed, but it held a thread of uncertainty. "You've been quiet all day. Everything okay?" He looked toward the street, half expecting to see Marina reappear, to confirm this wasn't just a dream. "I ran into someone," he said carefully. "Who?" "Marina." The silence on the other end stretched like taut wire. "You saw Marina?" Sophia finally asked, her voice tight. "She's pregnant," he said, the words slipping out before he could cage them. Another silence. Longer this time. He could hear her breathing, sharp and controlled. "And?" she pressed. "Is it yours?" "No," he said instantly, but even as he said it, doubt coiled in his gut. "I mean, I didn't know. I swear, Sophia, I had no idea." "Of course," she said too quickly. "Of course you didn't." But her voice had changed, cooler, distant, as if she'd already begun building walls. "I'm not going back to her," he said, more to convince himself than her. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Lucas?" Her question hung in the air, sharp as glass. "Because you sound shaken." He was shaken to his core. He struggled for words. Seeing her like that, carrying a child, alone, it made me feel things I thought I'd buried." "Feelings?" Sophia asked, voice brittle. "Or regrets?" He didn't answer, because the truth was he didn't know the difference anymore. "I'll be home soon," he said. "Finally. We'll talk then." He ended the call before she could respond. The park grew quieter as dusk approached. Streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows. He thought of Laura, his grandmother's name, growing inside Marina's body, unaware of the invisible ties already weaving her into his world. His phone buzzed again. A text from Marina. "I shouldn't have said her name. Not like that. But I couldn't let her be a secret. If you ever want to know more, I'm not asking for anything. Just thought you should know." He stared at the message. No demands. No guilt. Just truth offered gently. He typed a reply, deleted it, typed again. "Thank you for telling me. And thank you for naming her Laura." He didn't send it right away. His thumb hovered over the screen, because once he pressed send, there would be no pretending. No going back to the polished life where emotions were accessories, not necessities. He took a slow breath and sent it. A moment later, 3 dots appeared. She was typing, then stopped, then started again. She kicked today. For the first time, felt like a little wave. Lucas's throat tightened. He imagined Marina lying in bed, hand on her belly, feeling life stir within her. A miracle he'd missed, a moment he couldn't reclaim. And yet, she was sharing it with him now. Not as a claim, not as a weapon, as a quiet bridge. He stood up, the city lights now fully awake around him. The pendant in his pocket felt colder than before. Not worthless, but wrong. Not for Sophia. Not for this moment. Because some gifts aren't meant to be given in boxes wrapped in ribbon. Some are given in silence, in presence, in the courage to face what you've lost, and what you might still become. South leaned close over wine glasses, their laughter spilling into the street like music he no longer recognized. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even sad, not exactly. He was awake. An awakening, he realized, was far more terrifying than sleep. His phone remained silent now. Sophia hadn't called back. Marina hadn't replied again. The stillness should have brought relief. Instead, it screamed. He found himself outside his building, the sleek black doors sliding open automatically, as if expecting him. The lobby was immaculate, marble floors, a concierge who nodded respectfully. But tonight, it felt like a museum exhibit of a life that no longer fit. He took the elevator without looking at his reflection in the mirrored walls. When he stepped into his apartment, the silence was suffocating. Sophia wasn't there. A note rested on the kitchen island, written in her elegant script. Went to stay with Clara tonight. We need space to think. I hope you find what you're looking for. He read it 3 times. Each word stung less like accusation and more like quiet resignation. She wasn't fighting. She was letting go, gracefully, painfully, completely, and that hurt more than shouting ever could. He dropped his coat on the sofa and walked to the window, staring out at the city's glittering skyline, his empire of glass and steel, his trophies, his carefully curated solitude. And then, from the quiet, a memory surfaced. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but devastating in its simplicity. It was raining. Years ago, Marina had just lost her job. They'd sat on the floor of their tiny apartment, eating cold spaghetti from the pot, laughing until their sides hurt over nothing at all. She'd looked at him, rain streaking the window behind her, and said, "I don't need a mansion, Lucas. I just need you to be real with me." He'd kissed her then, promising he always would be. But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped. He turned from the window, his gaze falling on the jeweler's box still in his coat pocket. He pulled it out, unwrapped it slowly, and placed the moon pendant on the counter. It gleamed under the kitchen light, beautiful, yes, but empty. A symbol without a soul. His phone buzzed. Not a text. A call. Marina. His heart stopped. He answered on the first ring. "Marina, I'm sorry to call so late," she said, her voice softer than before, edged with something fragile. "I couldn't sleep. She's been restless, kicking like she's trying to tell me something." He sat down heavily on a bar stool. "Maybe she is." A pause. Then, quietly, "Do you ever wonder what kind of father you'd be?" The question hit him like a wave. Not accusatory, not manipulative, just honest. "I used to," he admitted, voice rough, "before everything fell apart. I imagined teaching her to ride a bike, reading her stories, walking her down an aisle one day." He swallowed. "After we lost ours, I told myself I didn't deserve that again." "You didn't lose her because of you," Marina said gently. "It was just life being cruel." "I walked away from you," he corrected. "That was my choice. And I let you," she whispered, "because I was tired of begging for your presence when your body was there but your heart wasn't." He closed his eyes. "I'm so sorry." "I know," she said, "but sorry doesn't raise a child. Showing up does." He didn't speak for a long moment. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, then faded. "Would you let me be there?" he asked, the words trembling on his tongue. Not as a father, unless you ever wanted that, but as someone who cares, who wants to help, even if it's just being there when she's born. Another silence, longer this time. He could hear her breathing, slow and measured, as if weighing not just his words, but the man behind them. Finally, you'd have to mean it, Lucas. Not out of guilt, not out of nostalgia, but because you truly want to be part of something messy and real and uncertain. I do, he said, and for the first time in years, he believed his own words. I'll think about it, she said. Not because I don't trust you, but because I have to protect her. Above everything. I understand. I'm scared too, she admitted, her voice cracking just slightly. Scared of letting you in and getting hurt again. Scared of keeping you out and her missing something she might have needed. He placed a hand over his own chest, as if to steady the ache blooming there. However you decide, I'll respect it. They stayed on the line for a while after that. Not speaking much, just existing in the same quiet space, separated by miles but closer than they'd been in years. When they finally said goodbye, the apartment felt different. Not empty, not cold, just waiting. He looked at the pendant one last time, then picked up his keys. He didn't know where he was going, but for the first time he wasn't running from something. He was walking toward it. But from the terrifying vulnerability of standing still, of waiting, hoping, wanting in a way that made him feel exposed, raw, almost childlike. He hadn't planned to come. He told himself he was just walking, clearing his head. But his feet knew better. They remembered the way. Her window was lit, a soft, golden glow behind sheer curtains. He could see her silhouette moving, slow, careful, one hand resting on the curve of her belly as she paced, probably trying to soothe the restless kicks of the daughter already stirring with life. He thought of that name again, Laura. Not just a name, a legacy, a whisper from his grandmother's kitchen, from the old photo albums he hadn't opened in years, from the lullabies hummed in Portuguese that Avó Laura used to sing when he was small. Dorme meu anjo. The moon is watching. Now, his own daughter, if she is mine, if she ever could be, would carry that same name into the world. A thread of light, stitched through generations. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He almost didn't answer, but it was Marina. Are you outside? She asked, voice low, as if she already knew. He swallowed. Yes. A pause. He could picture her at the window now, peering down at the street, searching for him in the shadows. Come up, she said finally, but leave your excuses downstairs. He crossed the street, his pulse thundering in his ears. Her door opened before he could knock. She stood there in loose linen pants and an oversized sweater, hair pulled back, eyes tired but steady. No makeup, no pretense. Just Marina, real, grounded, carrying a life that had somehow become the bridge between their broken past and an uncertain future. Hi, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Hi. She stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was small but warm, books stacked on every surface, a kettle steaming on the stove, the scent of chamomile and worn cotton filling the air. Nothing like his sterile penthouse. This place breathed. He didn't sit, didn't move far from the door. I didn't mean to show up like this, he began. I just couldn't sleep, and I kept thinking, what if she's born and I'm not there? What if she looks like you or like Avó Laura, and I miss it because I was too proud or too afraid to ask? Marina leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. Not in defense, but in thought. You can't just appear now and expect to be part of her life like a guest who shows up for dessert, she said gently but firmly. It's not about the birth, Lucas. It's about the 1,000 mornings after, the diapers at 3 a.m., the school plays you might miss because of a meeting, the tears you won't know how to wipe because you weren't there from the beginning. I know, he said, his voice cracking, and I don't expect you to hand me that. But what if I want to be there for the mornings? What if I'm done choosing comfort over truth? She looked at him for a long time, searching his face like she used to, looking not at the suit, the success, the surface, but at the man underneath. The one she once knew in silence, in shared glances, in the way he'd hold her when thunderstorms rolled in. "Why now?" she asked. "Why not when I was grieving our loss? Why not when I needed you most?" The question struck like a blade. "Because I was a coward," he admitted, voice raw. "I thought building something new would erase the pain, but it just buried me deeper. And seeing you today with her, it didn't bring back the past. It showed me what I've been missing in the present." Marina turned to the kettle, poured 2 cups of tea, and handed one to him. Their fingers brushed. A spark. Not romantic, deeper, human. She sat on the sofa, one hand resting on her belly. "She kicked again," she murmured. "Right when you said Avu Laura's name." Lucas froze. "Really?" Marina nodded, a faint smile touching her lips, like she recognized it. He sat beside her, not too close, but near enough to feel the warmth between them, the space where forgiveness might one day grow. "I've been reading to her," Marina said softly. "Stories, poems, even old letters I wrote to you and never sent." She looked at him. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because I wanted her to know love, even if it was just my voice speaking it into the quiet." His eyes filled. "I'd like to read to her too, if you'll let me." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed his hand gently on her belly. "Feel," she whispered. He did, and there it was, a soft, firm ripple beneath his palm. A flutter, a life, his, maybe not, but real, undeniably real. He pressed his forehead to his hand, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. Not tears of regret, not even of joy, but of awe, of standing at the edge of something sacred and being invited in. "I won't mess this up," he promised, voice trembling. "Not again." Marina didn't promise him a future. She didn't say yes, but she didn't pull away. And in that quiet apartment, with the moon high and a child stirring beneath his hand, Lucas felt something return to him. Not his old life, but something better. A second chance. His palm. He should have left hours ago. But something held him. Not obligation, not guilt, but a fragile thread of hope he hadn't felt in years. Marina appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a faded robe, eyes still heavy with sleep but clear with resolve. She didn't seem surprised to see him still there. "You stayed," she said, voice rough with mourning. "I didn't want to wake you," he replied, rising slowly. "And I wasn't ready to leave." She studied him, arms crossed loosely over her belly. "Last night wasn't permission, Lucas. It was a moment, a test maybe." "I know." He stepped closer, careful, respectful. "But it felt like the first real thing I've done in a long time." She sighed, running a hand through her tousled hair. "I keep asking myself, am I being foolish? Letting you in again when the last time nearly broke me?" He didn't flinch. "You're not letting me in. Not yet. You're letting me stand at the door. And that's more than I deserve." She turned toward the kitchen, filling the kettle again. "Sophia called me." Lucas froze. "What?" "Early this morning. Said she saw you leave your building last night and knew you'd come here." She glanced over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. She didn't sound angry, just tired. His stomach dropped. "I didn't tell her I was coming." "I know." She figured it out. Marina poured hot water over chamomile leaves, the steam curling between them like unspoken words. "She asked if you and I were getting back together." "What did you say?" "I told her the truth, that I don't know what we are, that this isn't about love, at least not yet. It's about a child who deserves more than silence." He nodded, throat tight. "She deserves someone who chooses her fully," he said quietly. "And I think I finally understand what that means." Marina handed him a mug. Their fingers brushed again, this time neither pulled away. They sat at her small kitchen table, sunlight pooling between them. For a long while they said nothing, just drank tea, just existed in the same quiet space. Two people who once knew every secret the other carried, now learning each other all over again. Not as lovers, but as something new, something fragile and necessary. Her father, Lucas finally said, the question he'd been avoiding. Did he leave because of the pregnancy? Or before? Marina looked down at her hands. Before. He didn't want children. Ever. When I told him I was keeping her, he said, "Then you're on your own." She gave a small, sad smile. And honestly, I was relieved, because I knew I'd rather raise her alone than with someone who saw her as a burden. Lucas felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it startled him. "She'll never be a burden," he said fiercely. "Not to me." Marina met his eyes. "Even if she's not yours?" The question hung in the air, sharp and honest. He didn't hesitate, even then, because she's yours. And that's enough. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You say that now, but what happens when your board meeting clashes with her first steps? When your new life, your real life, demands you choose between power and presence?" "I'm done choosing power," he said, voice low but certain. "I used to think success was measured in deals closed and penthouses owned. But last night, feeling her move under my hand, that was the richest moment of my life." Marina exhaled slowly, as if releasing a breath she'd held for months. "Then prove it," she said. "Not with words, with time, with consistency. Show up even when it's inconvenient, even when I push you away, even when you doubt yourself." "I will," he said. She reached across the table, not to hold his hand, but to place a small, worn notebook in front of him. "I've been writing letters to her, every Sunday, things I want her to know. About love, about courage, about the kind of man her mother once loved." She paused. "You can add one, if you want." He opened it. The pages were filled with Marina's looping handwriting. Poems, memories, hopes. On a blank page near the end, he picked up a pen. His hand shook slightly. He wrote only one sentence. "Laura, I don't know if I'll ever be enough, but I will spend my life trying." When he looked up, Marina was watching him, tears finally spilling over. Not from sadness, from something deeper, relief maybe, or the first fragile bloom of trust. Outside, a bird sang. The city stirred awake, and in that sunlit kitchen, with steam rising from their mugs and a child growing in silence between them, Lucas realized the truth. He wasn't here to fix the past. He was here to build a future, one honest moment at a time. But Sophia was waiting. She stood in his living room, arms crossed, eyes red-rimmed but steady. She'd let herself in with the key she still carried, a relic of a life they'd thought would last. "You stayed with her," she said. "Not a question. A statement." "I didn't stay the night," he replied softly. "But yes, I went back." She let out a breath, half laugh, half sob. "You love her." "I never stopped caring for her," he admitted. "But that's not why I'm doing this." "Then why?" Her voice cracked. "Because of the baby? Because of some guilt you suddenly discovered?" "No," he said, stepping closer but not touching. "Because I woke up, and I realized I've been living a life that looks perfect on the outside but feels empty in the bones. You deserve someone who chooses you without hesitation. And I can't choose you while ignoring a truth that's growing inside someone else." Sophia turned to the window, her reflection fractured by the city lights. "I knew," she whispered, "from the moment you came back from the jeweler that day. Your eyes were different, like you'd seen a ghost." "I saw a future," he corrected gently. "One I thought I'd lost." She turned back to him, tears glistening but her posture unbent. "I'm not going to fight for a place in your life you've already given to someone else. I'm not that woman." She walked to the hallway, picked up her purse. "But I loved you, Lucas. Not the version you showed the world. The quiet one who reads poetry in the bath and forgets to tie his shoes." He felt that truth like a stone in his chest. "I loved you too, for your fire, your certainty, your joy. But love isn't always enough when two people are walking in different directions." She nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Then walk your path. But don't pretend this doesn't hurt." "I won't," he said, "and I'll never forget what we had." She paused at the door, hand on the handle. "Will you be happy with her?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I think I'll finally be real." She left without another word. The door clicked shut, not with anger, but with finality. And just like that, the life he'd built in the last 2 years dissolved like smoke. That evening, he called Marina. "I ended it with Sophia," he said when she answered. A long silence. "I'm sorry," she said. "I never wanted to be the reason for someone else's pain." "You weren't," he said. "You were the mirror. And sometimes the truth hurts before it heals." She exhaled softly. "Come over tomorrow. I have a prenatal appointment. The doctor's office is downtown. If you still want to be there." "I do." "Then be on time," she said, a hint of her old dry humor returning. "I won't wait." He smiled for the first time in days. "I'll be early." The next morning, he stood outside her building at 8:45 a.m., dressed not in a suit, but in a simple sweater and jeans, clothes that felt like skin, not armor. Marina came down at 9 sharp, holding her bag, her pregnancy now impossible to ignore, her presence calm but guarded. "You're early," she noted. "I meant what I said." They walked in silence toward the subway, side by side but not touching. The city buzzed around them, ordinary, relentless. But between them, something new was growing. Not romance, not yet, but partnership, possibility. In the waiting room, filled with other expectant parents leafing through magazines or scrolling on phones, Lucas sat beside her, hands clasped tightly in his lap. He watched her rub her belly absently, her expression distant. "You're nervous," he murmured. "A little," she admitted. "What if everything's not okay? What if I can't do this alone?" "You're not alone," he said, and this time, he meant it with his whole being. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time he saw not just caution, but the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. When her name was called, she stood. Then, without thinking, she reached for his hand. He took it, and as they walked down the hallway together, toward scans, answers, and a future neither could predict, Lucas realized something profound. He wasn't here to replace a father. He wasn't here to win back a lover. He was here because somewhere inside Marina, a little girl named Laura was growing, and she deserved a world where people showed up, even when it was hard, even when they were scared, especially then. And as the nurse led them into the exam room, Lucas held Marina's hand a little tighter, not as a promise of forever, but as a vow for today, a form. Tiny limbs curled, a head tilted as if dreaming, a rapid, rhythmic pulse flashing like a beacon in the grayscale sea of the monitor. Lucas couldn't breathe. He'd seen ultrasounds before, years ago with Marina during the pregnancy they'd lost. That memory had been wrapped in grief, in silence, in the crushing weight of what could have been. But this was different. This was now. Alive. Real. Marina reached back without looking, her hand searching blindly. And he took it instantly, his fingers closing around hers with a tenderness that surprised even him. "She's perfect," Marina whispered, tears slipping down her temples into her hair. "She is," Lucas echoed, voice thick. The technician smiled. "Would you like to hear her heartbeat?" Before Marina could answer, Lucas said, "Yes, please." A click. Then, a sound filled the room. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. Fast, steady, unstoppable. It wasn't just a sound. It was a drumbeat of life, promise, a beginning. Lucas's vision blurred. He squeezed Marina's hand harder, as if anchoring himself to this moment so he wouldn't float away in the tide of emotion crashing through him. That heartbeat, so fierce, so small, was the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. After the appointment, they walked back into the daylight, the city suddenly brighter, louder, more vivid. Marina didn't let go of his hand right away. Neither did he. But the peace didn't last long. As they reached her street, his phone buzzed. A message from Clara, Sophia's closest friend. "She's not doing well, Lucas. She's pretending to be fine, but she's heartbroken. She thought you were forever." He stared at the screen, guilt twisting in his gut. Marina noticed. Sophia. He nodded, showing her the message. She stopped walking, looked at him fully. You can't fix both of us, she said quietly. You have to choose where your energy goes. Because if you keep looking back while trying to move forward with me, you'll fail us both. I'm not looking back, he said. I hate that she's hurting. So do I, Marina said. But she knew what she was entering, and so did you. This isn't about her anymore. It's about her. She placed a hand on her belly. And whether you're truly ready to be here, for the long, messy, unglamorous journey. He took a breath. I am. Then stop apologizing for choosing us, she said gently. Start living like you mean it. He deleted Clara's message without replying. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. That evening, he didn't return to his empty penthouse. Instead, he helped Marina unpack groceries, listened as she read aloud from a parenting book, even sat with her while she struggled to find a comfortable position on the couch. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just presence. Later, as he was leaving, she stopped him at the door. Why are you doing this? She asked, arms wrapped around herself. Really? He met her eyes. Because when I heard her heartbeat today, I realized I've spent my whole life chasing echoes of success, of approval, of a future that looked impressive but felt hollow. But that sound, that was real. That was now. And I don't want to miss another second of it. Marina's lips trembled. Even if it's hard? Even if I push you away when I'm scared? Especially then, he said. She opened the door wider. Then come back tomorrow. She has her first kick counting session. The doctor says it's important. A small invitation, but it felt monumental. He nodded. I'll be here. And as he walked home under the deepening twilight, Lucas didn't feel like a millionaire. He didn't feel like a man who'd lost a love or gained a second chance. He felt, simply, like a person. Standing on the edge of something fragile and sacred, she replayed every moment with Lucas. The way his voice had cracked when he heard Laura's heartbeat. The way he'd stood in her kitchen without demanding anything, just being there. Like a man who finally understood that presence wasn't a performance, but a gift. And that scared her more than his absence ever had. Because absence she could control. Loneliness she could armor herself against. But this slow, steady return of the man who once knew her soul. This made her hope. And hope, after loss, felt dangerous. Like walking barefoot over broken glass, believing the next step might be solid ground. She turned onto her side, wincing slightly as Laura shifted, pressing a small foot against her ribs. You're restless tonight, little moon, she whispered, using the nickname she'd begun calling her in secret. Are you dreaming of him too? The truth was, she hadn't told Lucas everything. Not about the nights she'd cried after their divorce. Not about how she'd kept the seashell pendant he'd given her on their first anniversary hidden in a drawer. Not about how, even after everything, she still turned to say something to him in the grocery store or on a rainy afternoon, only to remember he wasn't there. She'd built a life without him. A strong one, proud one. But strength wasn't the same as peace. Her phone lit up on the nightstand. A message him. Couldn't sleep. Kept hearing her heartbeat. Thank you for letting me be there today. She stared at the words. So simple. So honest. No excuses. No grand promises. Just gratitude. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She wanted to reply. Wanted to say, I'm scared too. Scared this is a dream. Scared I'll let myself love you again just to lose you when it gets hard. But she didn't type it. Instead, she wrote. She kicked 3 times during the counting session. All within 10 minutes. The nurse said that's a healthy sign. A pause. Then she's strong. Like her name. She hit send before she could overthink it. Almost instantly, the 3 dots appeared. He was typing. Like her mother. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She thought of the books stacked beside her bed. The Expectant Father, Gentle Birth, Gentle Mothering. Even an old copy of Letters to My Daughter by Maya Angelou that she'd bought the day she found out she was pregnant. She'd underlined passages, written notes in the margins, imagined reading them aloud to Laura one day. But who would read them with her? Who would sit beside her on the couch? holding their daughter between them, sharing stories of courage and kindness. She hadn't let herself imagine that until now. A soft knock at her door startled her. Not loud, just 3 quiet raps. Her breath caught. It was past midnight. She rose slowly, wrapped her robe around herself, and peered through the peephole. Lucas stood there, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the night chill. He wasn't smiling. He just looked uncertain, human. She opened the door a crack. "It's late." "I know," he said, voice low. "I walked here, couldn't stay away. I kept thinking, what if she comes early? What if you're alone? What if I'm not ready?" He looked down, then back up, eyes glistening. "But then I realized, I don't have to be ready. I just have to be here." Marina's chest tightened. She opened the door wider. "You're freezing." He stepped inside, the warmth of the apartment wrapping around him like an embrace. He didn't move toward her, just stood near the entryway, respectful, waiting. She gestured to the couch. "Sit. I'll make tea." As the kettle heated, they sat in silence. Not awkward, but full. The kind of silence that only exists between 2 people who've loved deeply and lost painfully, and are now learning how to breathe in the same room again. "Why now, Marina?" he finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Why let me in now, after all this time?" She wrapped her hands around her mug, staring into the steam. "Because I looked at her ultrasound today, and I saw your nose, your chin." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "And I realized, she's already part of you. Whether you stay or go, she carries you in her bones." He looked stunned. "You think she's mine?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But it doesn't matter. What matters is that she feels like you. And I don't want her to grow up wondering why the man who might have loved her walked away twice." He stood then, slowly, and walked to her. Not to kiss her, not to hold her, but to kneel beside the couch, his hand hovering over her belly. "May I?" he asked. She nodded. He placed his palm gently on her stomach. "Hi, Laura," he whispered. "It's me. I'm learning how to be here. It might take me time, but I'm trying." And as if on cue, thump. A strong, deliberate kick beneath his hand. Marina gasped. Lucas laughed. A soft, broken sound full of wonder. "She knows you," Marina said, tears spilling freely now. "She's been waiting for you too." He didn't move his hand, just stayed there, kneeling in the quiet dark, feeling the life they might have made together, were making together. Pulse beneath his palm. Outside, the city slept, but inside, something new was being born. They unfolded like real life. Quiet, uncertain, stitched together with small acts of courage. Lucas didn't move in. He didn't declare undying love. He simply showed up. Every morning, he'd text, "Good morning. How is she?" Every evening, if Marina didn't mind, he'd come by. Not with grand gifts, but with groceries, a warm soup, or just silence shared on her couch while she rested her swollen feet on a pillow. But it was what happened one rainy Tuesday that changed everything. Marina had woken with sharp cramps. Nothing alarming, but enough to make her pause. She'd been reading about Braxton Hicks contractions, but fear still coiled in her gut. She didn't call anyone at first. She never did. Independence was her armor. But as the rain drummed against the windows and another wave of pressure rolled through her, she found herself staring at her phone, thumb hovering over Lucas's name. She pressed call. He answered on the first ring. "Marina, I think I need to go to the hospital," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's probably nothing, but I'm on my way," he cut in. No questions, no hesitation. 20 minutes later, he was at her door, soaked from the rain, holding an umbrella in one hand and her hospital bag, packed weeks ago, just in case, in the other. "How did you?" she started. "I kept one in my trunk," he said simply. "Just in case." She didn't have the strength to argue. She let him help her into a coat, his hands gentle at her elbows, his eyes scanning her face for signs of pain. In the car, he drove faster than usual but not recklessly. One hand on the wheel, the other reaching for hers every few minutes. as if to remind her and himself that she wasn't alone. At the hospital, nurses moved with calm efficiency. Vitals were checked. A monitor was strapped to her belly. And then, there it was, Laura's heartbeat, steady and strong, echoing through the small room like a lullaby. "It's not labor," the doctor confirmed with a reassuring smile. "Just strong practice contractions. But good you came in. Better safe." Marina closed her eyes, relief washing over her like warm tide. But Lucas didn't relax. He stayed by her side, watching the screen, listening to every word the doctor said, asking quiet, thoughtful questions. What should she watch for? When should she call? Is there anything I can do to help at home? The doctor glanced between them, then asked gently, "Are you the father?" Marina opened her mouth, but Lucas answered first. "I'm the man who wants to be." The doctor nodded, not with judgment, but with understanding. "Then keep doing what you're doing. Presence matters more than paperwork." Later, as they walked back to the car beneath a sky finally clearing to soft twilight, Marina slowed her steps. "You didn't have to do all this," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." She stopped walking, turned to face him. Raindrops still glistened in his hair, his coat dark with damp. He looked exhausted and utterly real. "I've spent so long believing I had to do everything alone," she admitted, voice trembling. "That needing someone was weakness." "It's not," he said softly. "It's human." She looked down, then back up, eyes glistening. "What if I let you in, and you leave again? What if I trust you with her, and you decide it's too much?" He didn't flinch. "Then I'd be the fool, not you. But I'm not that man anymore." He took a slow breath. "I used to think love was about grand gestures. A diamond, a penthouse, a perfect life. But watching you today, scared but brave, carrying her through pain, that's the kind of love I want to be part of. Not the shiny kind, the real kind." She searched his face, the lines around his eyes deeper now, the confidence tempered by humility. This wasn't the Lucas who'd walked away years ago. This was someone forged, in regret, shaped by loss, and finally choosing to stay. Without a word, she reached for his hand. He took it, and as they stood there on the hospital sidewalk, the last rain fading into stars, Lucas felt something shift. Not just between them, but inside him. He wasn't just offering help. He was asking for a place. Not as a savior, not as a replacement, but as a partner in the messy, beautiful act of bringing a child into the world. "I'll walk you home," he said. She nodded. "Okay." And this time, when they reached her door, she didn't say goodbye at the threshold. She stepped aside. "Stay for tea. She's been quiet all evening. Maybe she wants to hear your voice." He didn't smile, didn't boast, just nodded, stepping inside like he belonged. Not because he'd earned it yet, but because he was finally willing to try. Marina sat curled on the sofa, one hand resting on her belly, her gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window. Lucas sat across from her, not too close, not too far. Close enough to see the way her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted her mug. "She hasn't kicked since we got back," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Lucas set his cup down. "Should I be worried?" She shook her head, but her voice wavered. "No, babies have quiet times. But sometimes the silence feels louder than the movement." He didn't fill the space with reassurance. He just waited. And then, softly, she spoke. Words she'd never said out loud before. "He didn't even ask to hear her heartbeat," she said, eyes still on the window. "Her father. When I told him I was pregnant, he just looked at me like I'd ruined his life. Like this little life inside me was a mistake he needed to walk away from." She swallowed hard. "And for a while I believed him." Lucas's chest tightened. "You're nothing like a mistake, Marina." She finally turned to him, eyes glistening. "I know that now, but back then, I was so alone. I'd lie in bed at night and wonder if I was strong enough to do this by myself. If I'd give her enough love to make up for what she'd miss." He leaned forward, voice low and steady. "She'll never miss a thing. Not while you're her mother." A tear slipped down her cheek. But I'm scared, Lucas. Not of labor, not of sleepless nights. I'm scared of raising her in a world where people leave when things get hard, where love is conditional, where presence is a privilege, not a promise. He didn't reach for her, not yet, but his voice dropped to a whisper, raw with honesty. Then let me show her something different. She looked at him, really looked, into the lines around his eyes, the quiet resolve in his jaw, the way his hands rested open on his knees, not demanding, just offering. How? She asked, barely audible. By staying, he said simply. Not because I have to, not because of duty, but because I choose to. Every single day. She closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, there was a new kind of vulnerability in her gaze. Less fear, more surrender. I told myself I wouldn't let you back in, she admitted. Not like this, not with her involved. Because if you leave again, it won't just break me. It'll break her before she even knows your name. I won't leave, he said. And this time it wasn't a plea. It was a vow. She took a slow breath, then placed her hand on her belly and held the other out to him. He took it without hesitation. Just then, a soft but firm kick pulsed beneath her palm. They both felt it. Marina let out a shaky laugh, tears spilling freely now. She agrees. Lucas brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. No grand gesture, just a quiet seal on a promise neither had spoken aloud, but both now carried in their bones. I don't need you to be perfect, she whispered. I just need you to be real. I'm learning, he said. With her. With you. Outside, the clouds parted. Moonlight spilled through the window, catching the tear on her cheek like liquid silver. And in that moment, with their hands joined and a child stirring between them, the past didn't vanish, but it lost its power. Because the future wasn't something they were waiting for anymore. It was something they were building, together. One honest breath, city washed clean, the air crisp with the scent of wet stone and fresh earth. Marina opened the door before he could knock, already dressed, her hair loosely braided over one shoulder. She looked tired but calm, her eyes softer than they'd been in weeks. You're early, she said, but there was no edge in her voice, only quiet acceptance. I have something to show you, he said gently, stepping inside without presuming. He placed the teas on the table and opened the folder. Inside were several pages. A recommendation letter, a clinic brochure, appointment options. I spoke with Dr. Valenka, he said. She was my grandmother's obstetrician. Later, she delivered my cousin's twins. She's retired from the hospital now, but she still takes private patients, only a few. I asked her if she'd see you. Marina blinked, surprised. You did this? I remembered how upset you were last month when your current doctor rushed through your visit. You said you didn't feel seen. He handed her a printed bio. Dr. Valenka listens. She's in her 70s, speaks 3 languages, and believes birth is a conversation between mother and child, not a procedure. Marina scanned the page, her fingers tracing the doctor's photo. But how would this even work? Cost? Scheduling? I've already taken care of it, he said quietly. Not as a gift, as an investment. In her. In you. She looked up sharply. Lucas, I can't let you. You're not letting me, he interrupted gently. I'm asking to be part of this. Not to control it. Not to own it. Just to walk beside you with better shoes. She stared at him, then down at the papers again. Why her? Why not just any top clinic? Because Avu Laura trusted her, he said, voice softening. And when I told Dr. Valenka the baby's name, she cried. Said it was like seeing her old friend again. A long silence settled between them, filled only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of sparrows outside. Then, Marina touched her belly and whispered. She kicked again this morning, right when I woke up. Hard, like she was saying, yes. Lucas smiled just slightly. She's decisive. She gets that from you, Marina said. And for the first time, the words didn't carry bitterness. Only truth. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn paperback. I also brought this. Remember it? She took it. The little book of comfort for mothers-to-be. The same one she'd left behind in their old apartment years ago. Its pages dog-eared, margins filled with her handwriting. I found it when I was clearing out storage last week, he said. I read it. Every page. Even the notes you wrote in the margins. Breathe. You're enough. This pain has purpose. His voice cracked slightly. I wish I'd read them back then. She clutched the book to her chest. You kept it all this time? I kept everything, he admitted. Not because I thought we'd get back together, but because I never stopped believing you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Even when I wasn't good enough for you. She turned away for a moment, composing herself. When she faced him again, her eyes were clear, resolute. Okay, she said. We'll meet Dr. Valenka, but on one condition. Anything. You don't pay for everything. I'll cover part of it. I need to feel like I'm still standing on my own feet, even if you're holding my hand. He nodded instantly. Done. A small, real smile touched her lips. You're learning. I have a good teacher. She gestured to the sofa. Sit. She's been active all morning. Maybe she wants to hear your voice again. He sat, and without prompting, she leaned into him slightly, just enough for his arm to slide gently around her shoulders, his hand resting near her belly, not on it, unless invited. They sat in silence for a while, watching sunlight stretch across the floor. Then softly, she said, I used to dream about this. Not the pregnancy, the after. Coming home from the hospital, her in my arms, you opening the door, saying, let me hold her. She paused. I stopped dreaming it because it hurt too much. He pressed his lips to the top of her head. Just once. Dream it again. She leaned into him a little more. And in that quiet living room, with sunlight warming the floor and a child turning within her, Marina allowed herself to hope. Not for a perfect future, but for a real one. One where love wasn't loud, but steady. He glanced at the screen, then silenced it without answering. He'd done that 3 times already this week. Every call went unanswered. Every message left on read. He wasn't being cruel, he was being clear. His life had changed. His focus had shifted. And he refused to let the ghost of what was haunt what could be. But Clara wasn't giving up. That evening, as he walked home through the cooling dusk, his phone rang once more. This time, he stopped under a street lamp, sighed, and answered. Clara. Lucas. Her voice was tight, brittle. She's not eating. She won't leave her apartment. She keeps saying she's fine, but she's not. And I can't, She asked about you today. If you'd even asked how she was. He closed his eyes. I ended things cleanly. I didn't lie. I didn't lead her on. No, you just left. Clara shot back softer now. And maybe that's fair. But she loved you. And now she feels like she was just a placeholder until Marina came back into the picture. That's not true, he said firmly. Sophia was never a placeholder. She was a chapter. A real one. But it's over. And staying in contact now would only confuse her, or give her false hope. Clara was silent for a beat. Then, she saw you. At the hospital. With Marina. Last week. Lucas froze. How? She went to pick up a prescription across the street. She saw you holding Marina's hand as you walked her to the car. You looked like you belonged there. He didn't deny it. I do belong there. Not because I want to erase what I had with Sophia, but because I finally understand where I'm meant to be. Clara exhaled sharply, almost a sob. Then at least tell her yourself. Not through silence. Not through me. Give her that much. He looked toward Marina's building, just 2 blocks ahead, lights glowing in her window. I'll talk to her, he said quietly. But not to rehash, not to reopen, just to close the door with kindness. Thank you, Clara whispered. He ended the call and stood there, the weight of his past pressing against his chest like a stone. The next morning he texted Sophia directly, simple, honest, final. I owe you a proper goodbye. Can we meet? Just for coffee. No expectations. Just closure. She replied an hour later. Café das Flores. 4 p.m. Don't be late. He arrived early, wearing the same sweater Marina had once said made his eyes look like the sea after rain. He sat at a corner table, hands folded, heart pounding not with guilt, but with resolve. Sophia arrived precisely at 4. She looked beautiful as always but thinner, tired. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You look different, she said, sitting across from him. I feel different, he admitted. She stirred her coffee slowly. I saw you with her, at the hospital. He nodded. I'm sorry you had to see that, but I won't apologize for being there. I know, she said softly. That's why I agreed to meet, because I finally understand you're not coming back. Not to me, and I don't want you to. He looked at her, surprised. I loved you, she continued, voice steady now. But I loved the idea of us more than the truth of us. You were never fully mine, Lucas. Not in the way I needed. And that's not your fault. It's just life. He reached across the table not to touch her, but to place his hand palm up, a gesture of peace. You deserve someone who chooses you without looking over their shoulder. Someone whose heart isn't already stitched into someone else's story. She looked at his hand, then met his eyes. And her? Do you choose her? I choose Laura, he said. And in choosing her, I'm learning how to choose Marina too. Not out of guilt, but out of grace. Sophia smiled then, a real one, sad but free. Then go be the man she needs, not the one I wanted. They sat in silence for a while, two people releasing each other gently, like birds from cupped hands. As she stood to leave, she paused. Tell her, I hope she's happy. Both of them. I will. She walked away without looking back. And Lucas sat there, watching the sunset paint the cafe in gold, feeling not relief, but reverence. Because real love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go, and when to hold on tighter to what truly matters. He pulled out his phone and texted Marina. Just said goodbye to the past. Ready for whatever comes next. With you. Her reply came instantly. She just kicked. Hard. Like she heard you. She looked up when he entered, her eyes tired but warm. You're back early. I wanted to be here before she falls asleep, he said, nodding to her belly. You said she's most active in the evenings. Marina smiled faintly, rubbing a hand over the spot where Laura had been rolling. She's been quiet since this afternoon. Maybe she's saving her energy. He knelt beside her, not touching yet, just present. I met with Sophia today. Marina's hands stilled. She didn't look at him, but her breath hitched, just slightly. Oh, I told her goodbye. For real this time. She finally met his eyes. And she understood. He reached out, gently brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She said to tell you she hopes you're both happy. Marina swallowed hard, her lower lip trembling. That's kind of her. It's honest, he corrected. And I realized something today, Marina. Something I should have seen years ago. He took a breath, his voice dropping to something raw, almost reverent. I never stopped loving you. Not really. I just got scared. Scared of how much you saw in me. How much you knew. I thought if I built a life that looked perfect, I wouldn't have to face the parts of myself I didn't like. She looked down at her hands, voice barely above a whisper. And now I don't want to build alone. He placed his palm gently on her belly, and as if on cue, a soft but firm kick pressed against his hand. They both froze, then laughed. Quiet, disbelieving, full of wonder. She's listening, Marina murmured. I hope she is, he said, because I need her to know this too. He turned fully to Marina now, eyes locked on hers. I'm not here because I think I deserve a second chance. I'm here because I finally understand what love really is. Not grand gestures or perfect timing, but showing up, day after day, even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when you're afraid. Tears spilled down Marina's cheeks, but she didn't look away. I've spent so long preparing to do this alone. Building walls so high I forgot what it felt like to be held. You don't have to hold them up anymore, he said softly. Not with me. She reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers over the curve of her stomach. What if we fail? What if we don't? He countered gently. What if we're exactly who she needs? Messy, healing, imperfect, but trying. She leaned her forehead against his, their breaths mingling in the quiet room. I'm scared to trust you with her heart. I'm scared too, he admitted. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, time seemed to pause, suspended in the space between two hearts learning to beat in rhythm again. Then, Marina whispered, "Stay tonight. Not in the guest room. Just here. On the couch. With me." He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He simply nodded, helped her to her feet, and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders as she settled back onto the sofa. He sat beside her, close enough that their arms brushed, her head eventually resting against his shoulder as exhaustion pulled her towards sleep. But before she drifted off, she murmured. She kicked again. Right when you said, "with you," he kissed the top of her head. Then she already knows. And as the streetlights cast long shadows across the floor, Lucas held the two people who mattered most. Not as a savior, not as a hero, but as a man finally learning to love without armor. The future was still uncertain. There would be sleepless nights, hard conversations, moments of doubt. But in that quiet apartment, with Laura stirring between them and Marina's breathing slow and steady against his chest, Lucas felt something he hadn't in years. Cass woke before dawn, still on the couch, Marina's blanket draped over his legs, her empty side of the sofa already cold. He found her in the kitchen, standing by the sink, one hand resting on the counter for balance, the other pressed to her lower back, her face tight with discomfort. "Marina?" he said softly, stepping closer. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but her breath came in shallow waves. "Just pressure. Worse than usual. It's probably nothing." But her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the counter. He didn't wait. "When did it start?" "An hour ago. It comes and goes." She tried to smile, but it faltered. "I'm fine." "You're not," he said gently, already reaching for her phone on the counter. "We're calling Dr. Valenka." "No," she said quickly, then winced as another wave rolled through her. "Not yet. It could just be Marina." He knelt in front of her, placing his hands gently on her hips, looking up into her eyes. "You don't have to be brave alone anymore. Let me help." She stared at him, tears welling. Not from pain, but from the terrifying relief of being seen, of being allowed to need someone. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. She gasped, gripping his shoulders. "Okay," she whispered, voice breaking. "Call her." He dialed with steady hands, speaking clearly to the doctor's assistant, describing the timing, the intensity, the fact that Marina was 38 weeks, right on the edge of full term. Dr. Valenka came on the line herself. "Bring her in," she said. "Now. Better to be safe." Lucas didn't waste a second. He helped Marina into her coat, grabbed the hospital bag, still by the door from the last scare, and guided her downstairs, one arm around her waist, the other holding the umbrella against the downpour. In the car, she leaned her head against the window, eyes closed, breathing slowly through another tightening. "Talk to me," he said, glancing at her between glances at the road. "Keep your mind focused." She opened her eyes, looked at him, really looked. "Do you remember? The night we lost our baby?" His throat closed. "Yes. I screamed your name," she whispered, "over and over. But you were on a business trip. And by the time you got back, it was over. The silence in that hospital room. It swallowed me whole." He reached for her hand, gripping it tight. "I won't let that happen again. Not this time." "You're here now," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "That's all I needed." When they arrived at Dr. Valenka's private birthing suite, a quiet, sunlit room that smelled of lavender and clean linen, The doctor was already waiting. She examined Marina with calm hands and kind eyes. "You're in early labor," she confirmed. "Nothing alarming, but she's coming. Probably within the next 12 to 24 hours. Marina exhaled, half in fear, half in awe. "Already?" Dr. Valenka smiled. "She's eager. And you're ready." Lucas never left her side. He held her hand through each contraction, massaged her back when the pressure built, fetched ice chips when her lips grew dry. He didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't pretend to have all the answers. He just stayed present, steady, grounded. Hours passed. The rain outside softened to a mist. Marina's contractions grew closer, stronger, more insistent. At one point, exhausted and trembling, she turned to him, eyes wide with vulnerability. "What if I can't do this?" He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing her tears away. "You already are, and I'm right here, with every breath, every push, every cry. You're not alone, Marina. Not this time." She nodded, leaning her forehead against his. And then, in the quiet hush of early evening, as golden light filtered through the blinds, her water broke. Dr. Valenka adjusted her gloves. "It's time." Lucas helped Marina onto the birthing stool, knelt before her, held both her hands as she began to push, first with fear, then with fierce, beautiful strength. "Breathe," he whispered. "I've got you. I've got her," she gasped back. And with one final, trembling push, a cry filled the room. Not a whisper, not a sigh, a full, strong, glorious cry. The sound of life arriving exactly as it should. Dr. Valenka wrapped the newborn in a soft blanket and placed her gently on Marina's chest. "It's a girl," the doctor said, voice thick with emotion. "Welcome, Laura." Lucas couldn't speak. He just stared at the tiny face, the dark hair damp with birth, the fingers curling instinctively around Marina's skin. Marina looked up at him, tears streaming, radiant with exhaustion and joy. "She's here." He touched Laura's cheek with one trembling finger, then leaned down and kissed Marina's forehead, his own tears falling freely now. "I'm here too," he whispered. "For both of you. Always." And as Laura rooted against her mother's skin, seeking warmth, seeking love, seeking home, Lucas finally understood. This wasn't a second chance. It was a new beginning, written not in regrets, but in breath. Marina sat propped on the bed, Laura cradled against her chest, skin to skin, the baby's tiny face pressed to her heart. She was dozing in short bursts, waking each time Laura stirred, her fingers instinctively brushing the downy hair on her daughter's head. Lucas sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting lightly on Marina's knee, the other holding a damp cloth he used to cool her forehead. "She's perfect," Marina whispered for the 10th time, voice hoarse from hours of labor, but glowing with a peace Lucas had never seen in her before. "She's yours," he said softly, watching Laura's lips twitch in sleep, her breath shallow and quick. "And you were magnificent." Marina turned her head toward him, eyes shining. "You stayed. I told you I would." "I know. But you really did." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Even when I screamed, even when I told you to go, you didn't flinch." "I wasn't going anywhere," he said, voice thick. "Not this time." Laura let out a small whimper, rooting again, and Marina shifted her gently to nurse. Lucas watched in awe, the intimacy, the trust, the raw beauty of it. He didn't look away. He didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like a witness to something sacred. After a while, Laura fell into a deeper sleep, her tiny hand fisted near her cheek. Marina carefully laid her in the bassinet beside the bed, tucking the blanket around her with infinite tenderness. Then she turned to Lucas, her expression shifting, softer, but searching. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. He didn't pretend to have a grand plan. "We go home. We learn. We stumble. We try again." He paused. "I don't need titles, Marina. I don't need to be called Dad, if she's not mine by blood. But I need to be here. In the middle of the nights, the worries, the first smiles. I want to be the one she looks for when she's scared. The one you can lean on when you're tired. Marina studied him, her eyes tracing the lines of his face. The stubble, the shadows under his eyes, the quiet devotion in his gaze. You've changed, she said. I grew up, he corrected gently. Better late than never. She reached out, her palm brushing his jaw. I'm still scared. Me too, he admitted. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city shimmered under a clear, star-dusted sky. Somewhere a car passed. A dog barked. Life went on. But in that room, time had reset. Later that night, as Marina finally slept, deeply, peacefully, Lucas stayed awake, sitting beside the bassinet. He watched Laura breathe, her chest rising and falling like a tiny tide. He thought of the pendant in his coat pocket, the one he'd bought for Sophia, still unopened, still irrelevant. He hadn't even thought of it since the contractions began. Because real gifts weren't wrapped in blue paper and silver ribbon. They were given in presence, in sweat, in tears, in the quiet courage of showing up when it mattered most. He reached into the bassinet, ever so gently, and brushed his fingertip over Laura's palm. She curled her fingers around it instantly. A reflex, the nurses would say, but to Lucas it felt like a promise. He leaned down, lips near her ear, and whispered the words he'd been too afraid to say for years. I'm here, Laura, and I'm never letting go. In the dim light, her eyelids fluttered, as if she heard him. And in that moment, Lucas didn't feel like a millionaire. He didn't feel like a man who'd lost and found and lost again. He felt like a father, not by biology but by choice. Midnight feedings, laundry baskets overflowing with tiny clothes, the soft weight of Laura in Lucas's arms as he paced the living room at 3 a.m., humming a lullaby he barely remembered from childhood. Marina healed slowly, her body tender, her heart even more so. Some days, she let Lucas take Laura for hours while she slept, tears of gratitude slipping down her cheeks when she woke to find them both dozing on the couch, his hands still resting protectively on the baby's back. Other days, she pulled inward, overwhelmed by hormones and fear, snapping at him over spilled water or a misfolded onesie, only to dissolve into silent sobs moments later, whispering, I'm sorry, I'm just so tired. And Lucas? He didn't retreat. He didn't take it personally. He simply handed her a tissue, made her tea, and said, I'm still here. One rainy afternoon, as gray light filtered through the curtains, Marina sat nursing Laura in the rocking chair, her gaze distant. Lucas was folding onesies nearby, careful not to rustle too loudly. She has your eyes, Marina said suddenly, voice soft but certain. He paused. You think so? Not just the color. The way she looks at things. Like she's seeing more than you think. She smiled faintly. The other day, when you were changing her, she stared right into your eyes and stopped crying. Just quieted. He swallowed, emotion rising like a tide. Maybe she knows I'd move mountains for her. Marina's voice dropped to a whisper. Do you ever wonder if she's really yours? He set the clothes down and walked over, kneeling beside the chair. It doesn't matter to me, Marina. Not in the way you think. He reached out, gently tracing Laura's cheek with his thumb. From the moment I heard her heartbeat, she became mine. Not by blood, but by choice. And I choose her. Every single day. Marina's eyes filled. But what if one day her father comes back? What if he wants to be in her life? Lucas didn't flinch. Then we'll cross that bridge. But until then... He looked up at Marina, his gaze steady, unwavering. She has me, and I'm not going anywhere. She studied him for a long moment, then reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist. You've changed so much. I had to, he said simply. Because what we have now, it's not about fixing the past. It's about building something real for her. Later that evening, as Laura slept in her crib, Marina stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself. Lucas joined her, not touching, just standing beside her in the quiet. I used to dream of a family, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Not a perfect one, just present, where love wasn't conditional on performance or silence. He turned to her then, his voice low and raw. Let me love you both, not as a second chance, not as redemption, just as your person. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time there was no fear in her eyes, only trust. You already are, she said, and in that moment, something shifted, not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of roots taking hold. The next morning, Lucas arrived with groceries and a small potted olive tree, Marina's favorite. For the balcony, he said, so she can watch it grow with her. Marina placed it by the railing, sunlight catching the silver-green leaves. Laura gurgled in her arms, reaching toward the light. From then on, their days settled into a new kind of harmony. Lucas didn't move in, not yet, but his toothbrush stayed in the guest bathroom. His favorite mug lived on the counter. He read to Laura every night, even if it was just 2 pages from a board book, his voice calm and steady as her eyelids grew heavy. And one evening, as Marina watched him cradle Laura against his chest, rocking slowly to the sound of rain on the roof, she realized something with quiet certainty. He wasn't just in their lives. He belonged, not because of obligation, not because of guilt, but because love, real love, isn't claimed. It's earned, day by day, choice by choice, presence by presence. And Lucas had chosen them, not once, but every morning without fail. Now, when Laura cried in the night, she didn't just call for Marina. Sometimes, in her sleep-soft babble, she'd reach for him too, and he'd be there, always, ready to hold her, to hold them both, in the quiet, sacred space through the open windows. The scent of jasmine drifting in from the balcony where the olive tree Lucas had brought now stood twice as tall. Laura was 6 months old, sitting on a blanket in the living room, cooing at a stuffed rabbit as she tried, again and again, to roll onto her stomach. Every time she succeeded, she'd look up at Lucas with eyes wide with triumph, as if to say, "Did you see that?" He sat cross-legged beside her, clapping softly. "You did it, my love. Again." Marina watched from the kitchen doorway, a mug of tea cradled in her hands, her heart so full it ached. She hadn't planned for this. Not the quiet joy, not the shared silences that felt like conversations, not the way Lucas now knew Laura's cry before she even made it. But life, she'd learned, rarely follows plans. It follows presence. Later, as Laura napped, Lucas stood by the balcony, staring at the city below. Marina joined him, leaning against the railing beside him. For a while, they said nothing, just listened to the distant hum of life, the breeze rustling the olive leaves. "Do you ever think about the pendant?" she asked softly. He turned, surprised. "The one I bought for Sophia?" She nodded. He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I gave it away, to a woman at the hospital gift shop. Her daughter's wedding was that weekend. She couldn't afford anything nice." He paused. It felt right. That kind of beauty belongs in joy, not in regret. Marina reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. His breath caught. "I kept something too," she said, opening it. Inside wasn't a jewel. It was the seashell pendant he'd given her on their first anniversary. Worn, slightly chipped, but carefully preserved. "I never stopped carrying it," she admitted, "even when I told myself I had." He stared at it, then at her, eyes glistening. "You kept it all this time?" "Because it wasn't just a gift," she said, voice trembling. "It was proof that once you saw me, really saw me, and I needed to believe that kind of love had existed, even when I couldn't feel it." He took the pendant gently, then reached for her hand, placing it in her palm and closing her fingers around it. "Keep it, but not as a memory of what we lost. Keep it as a promise of what we're building." She leaned her head on his shoulder, the weight of years finally lifting. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in soft purples and golds, Lucas sat on the floor with Laura in his lap, reading her The Moon and the Little Star, a book Marina had found at a second-hand shop, its pages yellowed but words timeless. Laura babbled along, her tiny fingers patting the illustrations, her eyes heavy with sleep. Marina watched from the couch, wrapped in a blanket, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of this ordinary moment. The man she once thought she'd lost, now holding their daughter with a tenderness that defied every broken thing between them. Lucas looked up and caught her gaze. He didn't speak. He just shifted slightly, patting the space beside him on the floor. She went to him without hesitation. He wrapped an arm around her. Laura nestled between them, her breath warm against Marina's collarbone. Outside, the first stars blinked awake. And in that quiet, sun-drenched room, Lucas finally understood what the title of his life should have always been. Not millionaire buys a pendant, but man learns to stay. Because the greatest wealth wasn't in bank accounts or penthouses. It was here, in the weight of a child in his arms, in the warmth of Marina's hand in his, in the quiet courage of showing up, day after day, not as a hero, but as a father, as a partner, as a man finally home. Laura sighed in her sleep, snuggling deeper into his chest. Marina rested her head on his shoulder. And Lucas closed his eyes not to escape, but to hold this.